The woods west of the San Pedro River were the kind that made even seasoned men uneasy. The trees grew thick and crooked, their branches locking together as if guarding secrets older than memory. A lone cowboy rode slowly through the narrow trail, following the faint tracks of a missing steer, unaware that he was no longer alone. The land had eyes, and they were watching him. She had been on his trail since early morning. The Apache woman moved with the patience of a hunter who understood silence better than sound. Every broken twig, every pressed blade of grass spoke to her. This man was not careless, yet he did not belong here. He crossed Apache land with the confidence of someone who trusted the world too much. That alone made him dangerous. She followed at a distance, studying the way he rode, how his hand never strayed far from his rifle, but never gripped it in fear. The cowboy sensed something was wrong long before he could explain it. The birds had gone quiet. The wind no longer stirred the leaves. His horse snorted and shifted nervously, as if it could smell another presence. He turned in the saddle more than once, scanning the woods, but saw nothing except shadows stretching too long across the ground. Still, the feeling pressed heavier with every step forward, like unseen fingers tightening around his chest. She decided to test him. A stone struck a tree to his left, sharp and sudden. His horse reared, bolting off the trail. The cowboy fought to stay mounted, but the ground rushed up to meet him, knocking the breath from his lungs. Dust filled his mouth as he rolled onto his back, hand flying toward his gun. The blade touched his throat before his fingers reached the grip. He froze. Above him stood a figure, half shadow, half spirit, eyes dark and unblinking. He could hear his own heartbeat, loud as a drum in his ears. Many men would have begged. Many would have cursed. He did neither. "I'm not hunting you," he said quietly, his voice rough but steady. "Just lost." For a long moment the woods held its breath. She searched his face for lies and found none she could name. Slowly, the blade lifted away. Without a word, she stepped back into the trees, vanishing as if she had never been there. The cowboy lay still long after she was gone, staring up at the branches overhead. He did not know why he had been spared. He only knew one thing for certain: the hunt was not over. The cowboy woke before dawn with the uneasy sense that the night had never truly released him. The fire had burned low, yet the ashes were stirred, shifted by someone who had been there while he slept. His rifle lay exactly where he had left it, untouched. That detail unsettled him more than if it had been stolen. He rose slowly, scanning the woods, but the trees stood innocent and still, hiding their secrets behind bark and shadow. She watched from high ground as he packed his bedroll. The Apache woman told herself she was only continuing the hunt, learning his habits, waiting for the right moment to finish what she had started. Yet her feet carried her after him even when the chance to strike passed. Again and again, he moved carefully now, no longer blind to the land. He paused to listen, stepped lightly near streams, and spoke softly to his horse as if it were a living companion rather than a tool. Those things mattered. By midday, the heat pressed down hard. The cowboy's steps slowed, and when he reached a narrow creek, he dropped to his knees and drank too fast. That was when his strength failed him. He swayed, cursed under his breath, and collapsed onto the sand. Fever had been riding him for days, though he had refused to name it. From the trees, she saw the tremor in his hands and the way his breath came shallow and uneven. She waited until sunset before moving. Caution was habit, but so was mercy. When she approached, his eyes fluttered open, unfocused, and he tried to sit up, only to fall back again. She placed a water skin beside him and stepped away. By the time he woke fully, she was gone, leaving only damp footprints leading back toward the creek. The next day, soldiers rode through the woods. Their voices were loud, careless, and full of threat. They spoke of hostiles and promised fire and lead. The Apache woman listened from the brush and felt anger rise like heat in her chest. When they asked if she had seen a lone cowboy, she shook her head and sent them east, deep into broken land, where trails vanished and horses tired quickly. That night, she sat across the fire from him for the first time, just far enough to remain a shadow. He didn't reach for his gun. He simply nodded, acknowledging what he already knew. She studied his face in the firelight, searching for greed, cruelty, or fear. Instead, she found gratitude and a quiet respect that did not ask for her name. She left before dawn again, but this time the hunt had changed. She was no longer following an enemy. She was watching a man, and that realization disturbed her more than any blade ever could. The first gunshot shattered the afternoon like a curse spoken too loud. Birds exploded from the trees, and the woods that had once whispered now screamed with chaos. The cowboy dove behind a fallen log as bullets tore through bark and leaves. He counted the shots quickly, calm despite the fear burning in his chest. 3 men at least, maybe more. Outlaws by the sound of their guns and the way they shouted his position to one another like hunting dogs. He fired back with care, each shot meant to slow, not waste. Still, numbers pressed in on him. A round grazed his shoulder, hot and sharp, and blood soaked into his sleeve. His horse screamed somewhere in the distance, then went silent. For the first time since entering the woods, the cowboy thought he might not leave them alive. She had been tracking him when the shooting started. The Apache woman moved fast now, no longer a shadow but a storm. These men did not belong here. They carried the smell of greed and death, and they would leave nothing standing if allowed. She nocked an arrow, her breath steady, her mind clear. The first outlaw fell without a sound, an arrow buried deep in his throat. The second turned too late, his curse cut short as another arrow found his chest. Panic spread through the remaining men. They fired wildly, hitting nothing but trees and fear. When she stepped into view at last, painted for war, they saw more than a woman, they saw judgment. The last man ran. Silence returned slowly, broken only by the crackle of disturbed leaves. The cowboy stood swaying, his gun still raised. When he saw her clearly for the first time, he lowered it. She stood a few steps away, bow in hand, eyes sharp but not unkind. "You were hunted," she said. He nodded. "So were you." They sat by the creek as dusk bled into night. She cleaned his wound with practiced hands, firm but gentle. He told her of the ranch he'd left behind, of work that paid little but felt honest. She spoke of land taken, of family lost, of songs sung quietly so the wind would remember them. There were no promises in their words, only truth. He did not defend those who had hurt her people. He did not ask her to forgive. He listened, and that mattered more than apology. When the fire burned low, she stood. The choice before her was heavy. She could disappear back into the woods, leaving him alive and changed, or step onto a path that had no map. Before leaving, she spoke once more. "Tomorrow, come to the old cottonwoods at sunrise." Then she vanished into the dark, leaving the cowboy staring into the fire, knowing his life was about to change forever. The sun rose pale and quiet as the cowboy reached the old cottonwoods, their branches twisted and ancient, roots gripping the riverbank like hands that refused to let go. He came alone, just as she had asked, carrying no rifle and no rope. The woods felt different now, less like a trap and more like a threshold. Every step forward was a choice, and he took them without hesitation. She waited with her people at the edge of the clearing. The Apache woman stood slightly ahead of the others, her posture calm but resolute. Elders watched with eyes that had seen too many broken promises and too much blood. Children whispered and stared. This was no capture, no trade made under threat. It was something rarer, and because of that more dangerous. "He crossed our land," one elder said, his voice low. "Why does he still live?" She answered before the cowboy could speak. "Because he did not take. He listened. I hunted him to know his heart, and I know it now." The cowboy stepped forward, head bowed in respect. He did not claim innocence, nor did he ask for protection. He spoke plainly of who he was and what he owned, which was very little. He said he would leave if told to leave, and stay only if invited. His honesty rippled through the circle like wind through grass. The elders spoke among themselves for a long time. The river moved on, indifferent as it always had. At last, the oldest woman nodded once. "A husband is not chosen by force," she said. "He is chosen by courage and patience." That night there was no loud celebration. A small fire burned as stars filled the sky. She placed her hand in his, not as a prize won, but as a bond freely given. He understood then that love, like land, could not be owned, only respected. In the days that followed, the cowboy learned a new way of living. He learned when to speak and when silence carried more meaning. He learned the names of plants, the stories of the hills, and the weight of history carried in quiet glances. She learned his steady ways, his stubborn kindness, and the way he faced hardship without bitterness. The woods that had once echoed with pursuit now held shared footsteps. Where there had been fear, there was trust. Where there had been a hunt, there was a home. And in a world shaped by conquest and loss, an Apache woman and a cowboy proved that the strongest unions are not taken by force but chosen, together under an open sky.